Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had a secret. Every day, he thought of a woman who changed his life more than any song ever did. This woman wasn't just his muse, she was his guiding light, making sure he didn't slip into darkness. "If I never do anything wrong, it's all because of her," he told a reporter, speaking of his deep gratitude. Her presence was like a shield, stopping him from making mistakes. In the fall of 1958, Elvis returned to Nashville, a city steeped in music, with a promise in his heart. It was a promise made to this woman during the last Christmas she would celebrate with him. She had encouraged him to record an album of gospel songs, something that seemed strange coming from the rebellious rock and roll star known for his provocative moves and lyrics. Yet, to Elvis, there was no contradiction. He saw rock and roll as a mix of gospel and rhythm and blues, a blend that felt natural to him. In a studio filled with the energy of someone who knows he's about to create something special, Elvis recorded 14 tracks in just one night. His style was reminiscent of a preacher from Memphis or the small Assembly of God church in Tupelo. He didn't just sing, he delivered the words with the passion of someone sharing a vital message. He sang spirituals, hymns, and even told the story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho, infusing these ancient tales with his unique flair. To Elvis, gospel music wasn't just a genre, it was pure. "Gospel music is the purest thing on this earth," he often said. Though his religious albums weren't aimed at chart success, they sold millions over the years. For him, the act of singing wasn't just about the music, it was about living a life he believed was guided by a higher purpose. Elvis's personal life was a different story. While he took his faith seriously, his behavior was far from pious. He was sexually promiscuous, often unfaithful and prone to jealous outbursts, yet he was also incredibly generous. If someone admired a piece of jewelry he wore, he'd often give it away. He gifted a car to a maid at Graceland because he thought it was too far for her to walk to the bus stop. His actions showed a man torn between earthly desires and spiritual values. His language reflected this inner turmoil. To those who knew him, he could switch from profound religious insights to crude humor in an instant. His mother's teachings were evident in his generosity and faith, but his personal struggles with fame and desire created a complex character. Despite this complexity, Elvis found himself pulled back into the whirlwind of Hollywood. After a brief hiatus, he was pushed into making 2 movies in quick succession in 1960. One was Wild in the Country, a tale of a poor boy with literary ambitions, starring alongside Tuesday Weld. Though the film didn't live up to expectations, Elvis was excited about the role, seeing it as a chance to connect with his own unfulfilled dreams of education. However, the film was marred by last-minute script changes and Elvis's own frustrations. His temper flared and he began to question if he belonged in roles that weren't purely musical or that didn't let him shine as himself. The experience left him wondering if he would ever find a character that resonated with him as deeply as Elvis Presley, the man himself. Back in Los Angeles renting a house in the affluent Bel Air area, Elvis couldn't help but think about the double-edged sword of fame. The movie Sunset Boulevard had once warned of Hollywood's seductive, yet destructive allure. Now, as he drove home after filming, he might have pondered if he was living that very tale. Despite his success with songs topping charts across the world, Elvis felt a void. His hits like Wooden Heart and The Girl of My Best Friend were massive, yet they couldn't fill the space left by his lost Christmas love. His entourage, dubbed the Memphis Mafia, tried to keep him entertained, but even they couldn't fully mask the emptiness he felt. Elvis Presley was at the peak of his career, yet something was missing. His journey was far from over, and the contradictions within him would continue to shape the legend he became. Elvis's life was changing rapidly, and one big change was the movie industry calling his name. In April 1961, he traveled to Hawaii. But this trip was not just for fun or to perform a charity concert. Elvis had a bigger job to do. He was set to star in a movie called Blue Hawaii. This movie was going to be special for Elvis. It would not just make him money, but it also gave him his biggest hit song, Can't Help Falling in Love. This song became very famous and is still loved by many people today. For Elvis, however, the movie was not exactly what he had hoped for when he started his career. Back in 1957, he dreamed of doing more than just singing and performing in movies that focused on pretty girls, sun, and songs. Those were not the kinds of stories he wanted to tell. But here he was, about to make a movie that fit right into that formula. Despite these feelings, Elvis went along with the plan. He traveled to Hawaii to shoot the movie. The film Blue Hawaii turned out to be a huge success. It made a lot of money for Paramount Pictures, the company that made the movie. It also made Elvis very popular, and he sold lots of albums because of the music from the film. The song Can't Help Falling in Love became one of his signature songs, something he would sing at almost every show for years to come. But for Elvis, this success had a bittersweet taste. It reminded him that his career was taking a path he didn't fully want. He had started out as a young man with big dreams, wanting to make music and entertain people in his own way. Now he was part of a Hollywood machine that often had other ideas about what he should be doing. As he filmed in Hawaii, Elvis couldn't help but think about the difference between his early days and where he was now. Back then he was just starting out, full of ideas and energy. Now he was a star, but sometimes it felt like he was just following a script that wasn't entirely his own. Despite these thoughts, Elvis threw himself into his role in Blue Hawaii. He sang, acted, and became a part of the movie's magic. When the film was released, it was a big hit. People loved it, and Elvis's star shone brighter than ever. But behind the scenes, he was already thinking about the next chapter of his life and career. He knew that things were changing fast, not just for him, but for the whole music industry. As he left Hawaii and headed back to the mainland, Elvis couldn't shake off the feeling that he was at a crossroads. He had achieved so much, but he was also aware that the path ahead would be different from what he had initially imagined. The music world was evolving, and so was he. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Elvis Presley was about to face new challenges and opportunities that would shape his life and career in ways he was just beginning to understand. Elvis Presley found himself in a tough spot after making his album for Blue Hawaii. He wasn't happy with the songs, but he knew he owed gratitude to Tom Parker, who had worked hard to secure him good deals. At first, Elvis tried to push aside his doubts and just focus on singing, treating it like a job to get paid for. When Elvis saw the cover for Blue Hawaii, he didn't say anything about it. The picture showed him in a Hawaiian shirt, with flowers around his neck and a ukulele. This was very different from his earlier image, which was all about rebellion and rock and roll. It seemed like Elvis was moving away from being the cool young rebel to more of an adult entertainer. Tom Parker believed this was the way to make more money. He thought Elvis should appeal to older audiences too, even though the young generation was getting smaller and younger. Elvis wasn't completely against this change. He wanted to be rich, and he still respected Parker, even if he felt uncertain about the direction he was heading. So Elvis decided to go along with Parker's plan and not argue too much. He hoped things in Hollywood would get better. Instead, he kept making movies, sometimes releasing a new film every 4 months, each backed by an album. Elvis admitted later that not all his films were bad, some were even fun and entertaining. One of these was Follow That Dream, where he played a cheerful hillbilly. But he was soon back to filming again, this time in Kid Galahad, his 6th movie in just 18 months. This was too much for any artist. Tom Parker and his team had a clear plan for Elvis's future films. They wanted him to focus on simple stories with lots of songs, following the success of movies like Blue Hawaii. Between 1962 and 1967, Elvis starred in 15 more films, with songs stopping the action every few minutes. The success of Blue Hawaii changed everything, but it also marked the start of a downward slide for Elvis in movies. He knew it was mostly his own fault for not pushing for better roles or stories. However, the songwriters connected to Hill and Range made it hard for him. They kept demanding a big share of the money from song sales, which limited the number of good songs they could write just for Elvis's films. The system wasn't fair to Elvis. Of the 14 songs recorded for Blue Hawaii, only 2 were not published by one of the companies connected to Elvis's music. This situation was good for Parker and his partners, including Tom Parker, who took a big cut of the earnings from the films and songs. For Elvis, this meant he had to constantly find ways to earn money, whether through running his home, Graceland, or renting homes and offices. He spent a lot and gave generously, which meant he needed a lot of money. The songwriters couldn't keep up with the demand for new songs for his films. They could barely write 12 good songs a year for 3 movies. In the end, Elvis felt trapped in a cycle he couldn't easily escape. He tried to stay loyal to Parker, but it was hard to keep going when the path ahead seemed to only lead to more of the same. This struggle to balance his art with the demands of his career and finances would continue to challenge Elvis in the years to come.